Hi, and welcome back to the third session. I'm Gianluca Fiorelli, and today we are going to have a new fantastic guest. She is a marketing consultant, trainer, speaker. She is the founder of ML for SEO. ML obviously stands for machine learning for SEO. And in fact, if this is her definition, it's ML for SEO is the platform to learn practical AI ML as a marketer, which is a great idea. She is the community lead at Women in Marketing. She lives in Bulgaria. Her name is Lazarina Stoy. How are you doing?
Hello, hello. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Okay, it's great to have you, and I think we are going to have a very nice conversation also because we share so many interests together related to linguistic, to entity search, to all these kind of things that all of a sudden have become so important also for all the other SEO in the world.
Yes,
But
super
talking,
trendy. Yes.
yeah, well, we are on the lucky side of a trendiness. Um, Talking about SEO, how SEO is treating you lately during all this 2025 and the beginning of 2026?
I think it's a very exciting time to be an SEO, to be honest. So in 2025 and 2026, I've been building the ML for SEO platform, and I've also been working on building a community as well. So obviously these are business entities first and foremost, and it's been really fun to invest in SEO as a channel from the get-go. And especially in times like these, I think it's super exciting. So I think SEO in 2025 and especially in 2026 is going to be the channel for small business owners. And it's becoming even more important for bigger enterprise brands, especially now with AI search as well becoming part of SEO. At least in most departments, I think it's being considered as such. So yeah, exciting, super dynamic, but very exciting.
Yeah, super dynamic for sure. There is no, it's almost, not say daily, but almost weekly that new features are added to Gemini, to A mode. Now, Web Guide tested live in the main search and the new models of ChatGPT, the battle between all the competitors in AI search sphere. It's really a frenzy moment, let's say so. And before we were joking about how much all the things related to entity search, let's say, which is maybe we can consider it as the base of everything we are optimizing for lately, plus many other things, obviously, is all of a sudden become so fashionable to talk about. And even if, sincerely, it's from more than 10 years ago, with the advent of a knowledge graph, that something called, if we want even with the advent of schema, that something called entity search would have been something to put into the radar of every SEO. What do you think about this all of a sudden this importance given to entity search and all the derivatives? And why do you think SEO finally decided that schema maybe is not, for instance, just for rich results and entity search is not just a somehow theoretical, quite foggy definition of things?
Yeah, I'll start with the first question. Why is it suddenly super popular? I think in the past year, SEOs have been really pushed to understand how a new technology works. I'm talking about like AI search systems, and that's when I use this term, I'm thinking of ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI mode, AI overviews, anything with LLMs in it. SEOs have been pushed to really understand how it works. I'm not saying that everyone does understand it, but we have been at the forefront of answering questions within an organization, regardless whether you're working agency side or in-house or freelancer or whatever, you're the person that people come with the questions. How does this work? How do we appear? What happens? So I think the first wave of, the discussions around this stuff like AI search systems in general, didn't really look into how these systems work. Of course, there was a ton of discussions, most of which weren't really correct about how to appear, what to do, and so on. And then once people really understood that you have to look into the patterns, understand how the systems work, understand how they rank, I think three things emerged as really important. The way to reduce, hallucinations and, to improve the model's performance from the point of view of Google, Perplexity, ChatGPT, and so on. They did it through adding the live index by Google and then also adding entity relationship mapping, adding knowledge graph access, adding access to things like Wikidata for validation. And that was like the first thing that they did in order to improve the models. And so when SEO started to look into how these things work, one thing came up again and again, entities, semantic structure. And of course, one thing that is not really currently talked about by a lot of people, Mike King is one that talks about this very frequently, and credit to him for that. But how these systems utilize context as well, like personalization. And I think it's very interesting because when you look at traditional search systems, they have been using personalization aspects, components to rank results for ages now, at least like 5, 10 years. But no one has talked about this. And, the people that understand the patterns and understand semantic search, they know that there is a very high component of what you see, both in traditional results and in AI search systems as well, that is very, very personal to you, what you have clicked on before, your user history, where you're located, what languages you speak, blah, 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 all of these personalization aspects. And so, yes, that's why I think it's a semantic SEO is currently like the trend, you know? And I think the next one is going to be how is personalization actually affecting, everything, how we track, what we rank for, how do we appear, and so on. But I think we're not there yet. People are just catching up to entity SEO and semantics.
Well, I remember many. I was still a Moss associate, and I think it's still there, buried in the blog of Moss, a post I wrote about SEO in the era of personalization, which was about a personalization in classic search.
Mm.
And yes, it's not just about classic example of a mobile search. So where are you? IP detection, device detection, search history, and then I was talking of a very old patent of Google, which was about the search entities, not really the classic entities, but about search entities, which my homage to Bill Slaskey was the first talking about web, and it was really talking about this web document as an entity, so query as an entity, and so on and so on. And yes, I think that people didn't really thought about personalization because, first of all, somehow conditioned by the classic keyword tracker, which substantially pulls you the tracking as if from a, let's call it, neutral condition. So, and then sincerely, because it's true that there is personalization classic search, but the difference sometimes are not so big as we can see now with AI search. Surely when it comes to AI search, personalization is evident. I mean, what I'm asking is the answer that I'm going to receive surely is going to be different from the one you're going to receive for the same question. And that's why probably that people start to understand that the prompt tracking is not really a good idea, apart from the cost, but also because what are you tracking really?
Is traditional tracking also a good idea? I don't know. In an
Well,
ideal world,
traditional,
I think we
but
would
I
have.
think that traditional tracking, maybe not now, also because at least the most advanced tool for tracking, included our host advanced web ranking, at least give us the pixel position, because one
Mm.
thing is being position one, classic position one. After, I don't know, a block of advertisement, an AI overview, and maybe a image block. So substantially in way below the fold. Another thing is being sometimes help them to still find them. Classic thing, blue links search results without we no AI overview with just 10 blue links. So that is big difference. But maybe Bob, because the differences between personalized SERP and neutral SERP were not so big or not so evident. At least that was not just more like a visualization of it, let's say, visibility score of system,
Mm.
for instance. So that's why maybe that kind of, not really for the ranking itself, but as a
Share
screenshot
of
of
search.
where I'm visible,
Yeah.
and especially in what kind of feature I'm visible. That is maybe the most important function of rank trackers right now. But for prompts, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and
so,
also
so,
synthetic queries as well, because right now we have a ton of AI search platforms generating query fan outs, synthetic queries,
oh,
and
yes.
yeah. So the concept of search volume by who? Is it by your real users? Is it by
Well,
agent? And who are you? Is
but
it
maybe the
trackers? You
smartest,
also say,
the smartest tool providers could say that, oh, it's generating the volume is not really important because in the future, but your website maybe is going just to be visited just by
yeah,
bots. But we are
and
not still,
also
we
making
are not
money.
still
Yeah,
very in the agentic search
yeah.
as we think should be the agentic search.
They
These are
also
just bots.
recently
Yes.
came out to say that agentic search and the idea of AI agents and AI browsers is flawed because there's no way to stop, at least at the present time, there's no way to stop the AI prompt injection issues. So
Yeah.
it basically has like a fundamental operational issue from being scaled. So whenever like the shopping started or Atlas, I think it was by
Hmm.
ChatGPT, where you have this like looking at your browser and stuff, they came a ton of reports to say that in order to generate a response, the chat within Atlas was looking at, for instance, shared Google Drives that someone has given permission to one file, and then the system goes into the shared drive of another person to look at
Yeah.
files and generate a response, and all of these different things. So yes,
And
I'm
that's
I'm
it.
a little bit hesitant to say that this will be the
Me too.
future.
She said really, I tested them, but not really transitioned to any of
Mm,
these agentic browser as my default browser.
yeah.
And I also read something just a few days ago, and I think it was from the guys of Gemini themselves, that were substantially implying that the prompt injecting issue probably never will be totally
Yeah,
solved.
yeah. It was by, like, the team of OpenAI. Yeah, they
Oh,
said it.
yes.
Like, at the moment, they can't solve it. So of course, they're still raising billions and, like, "Yes, this is the future, everyone." But, yeah, we
Yeah.
have to look at it from a critical lens, I think. There's
Mm-mm.
a ton of stuff in machine learning and AI. I mean, AI, of course, I'm saying in quotations because everything is AI right now. But the biggest organizations, like enterprise companies, they are adopting AI, but not generative AI because it's still so new, so uncertain, and it's very difficult to scale with control and with predictability, like predictable outcomes every time. And what they're doing instead is they're pausing AI, generative AI investments, and they're pivoting to classic machine learning as well. So for those that don't know the difference, machine learning sits at as a subset of AI. Generative AI is also a subset of AI, but it also includes a ton of other things, right? So in classical machine learning, the main difference is that you train a model, and that model is trained on optimal like data points, and it has one singular task or maybe two tasks, whatever, but it's very narrow, and its main aim is to provide a prediction based on whatever the task is. So let's say, for instance, you are trying to classify whether a page is a news article or an opinion piece. That's a very like simple example. So that will be one ML model. And if we look at LLMs, for example, they are kind of like creative machines. So when we look at the data that we have image-based data, we have numeric data, we have video data, we have text data, of course, tons of it. And so what we want to do is try to build like very narrow models that do the job that we do, and then orchestrate them to work in tandem to automate small parts of our role. So we can be more efficient when we do things. Let's say, for instance, a content audit or a technical audit, but we still are in charge and we are, fully in control of the output, as opposed to just saying, ChatGPT, audit this website for me. And then what it does is, of course, it's not what it's supposed to be doing, because that's just not what it has been trained to do.
So, in this context, cannot we consider that something that is all of a sudden pop out in these last 2 weeks, which is context graph, something that is going this direction, and considering this concept of context graph, which is something that maybe I talked with Andrea Volpini about this, and I was asking him, isn't this context graph what I was substantially calling myself proprietary knowledge graph? So knowledge graph based on all your enterprise documentation, close into your enterprise documentation. And it was coming to my mind that it may be Google the smartest guy in the room with having created NotebookLM, where you can put all your documentation, even with a pro subscription like mine, you can put, I think, 300 documents, which is immense. It's for the things that I do, let's say, with a client. And combine it with LLM for certain kind of things, like, for instance, for sheet analysis or something like this, in order to find patterns, etc., 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 by using everything inside the notebook. What do you think? I'm totally wrong, or I'm in the good direction?
No, I think you're in a great direction. So I think it's important for me to say this, because I just want to say this so people don't understand me wrong. I am 100% a proponent of LLMs, like chatbots, ChatGPT, Gemini, NotebookLM. I love them. I use them on a daily basis. I think what you're doing, of course, great use case, because you are utilizing your own data in order to transform it in another format, right? You're taking text, visuals, and so on, you're transforming it to text, but it's based on what you have created. My pet peeve with the use of LLMs is when we are trying to replace thinking or research or planning, which are steps that we should own. And I also think that there are some use cases where people are trying to, let's say, for instance, do entity analysis with LLMs, which they can do, but they're just not the best at this. And you also don't get the full suite of data that you will get if you use entity extraction API. Or let's say, for instance, you're doing content outlining with an LLM, which, if that's the only thing you do without you researching the topic or pulling in some user research or researching entities, attributes, you're just not doing the most that you can do, and everyone can replicate it. So what I would recommend using LLMs for are exactly those kind of transformations. So you're taking a PDF document and you want to transform it to a social media post or a blog post. That's fine. You still have to do editing, of course, as we all do, but you are taking content from one format and you're transforming it to another. Now we're seeing LLMs transforming, let's say, images to video or text to image and so on. Like, these types of content transformations work fantastic. What you shouldn't use an LLM for would be text classifications or forecasting. I've seen this actually, like trying to forecast data or like doing data analysis with an LLM is not really like very reliable, especially at scale. Like, I'm not saying here mostly like what you chat with Claude or ChatGPT. It can work, let's say, in an isolated example, but if you're running the API and trying to analyze your Search Console data, that's just not a good use case, because that's not what it's built to do. Also, coding, I think, especially if small business owners and in general, like beginner or intermediate SEOs, learn how to code with Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, that will be the key differentiator between them being, waiting for something to happen, let's say approval or proof of concept building or, whatever it is, you can now actually resolve most of the issues on a small to medium sized website on WordPress or on Wix or whatever with Claude, let's say, or ChatGPT. So you need to learn how to prompt correctly and what people call like vibe coding. I think that is the skill to acquire in 2026 as an SEO, as someone that works with technical instruments, website. I'm talking. So if you are even a content strategist, like if part of your role is to strategize posts for social media, for YouTube Shorts, for whatever else, you have to know what tools you can use to transform posts from one format to another, and also what tools you can use to build automations, because no one is going to pay the salary of someone, an employee, that doesn't know automation in 2026, at least the basis. How do you use Claude in your day-to-day work? How do you use ChatGPT? And building, a system, building SOPs, like documenting things, that those are things that Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini can be insanely valuable for. And, building internal knowledge systems as well. I can go on and on.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
yes.
you can
Well,
tell.
it's everything
Sorry.
interesting. Now, so returning to, for instance, to entity analysis, entity extraction, and so on.
Yeah.
Never forget that there is something named entity recognition there, which is
Yeah.
very, very important to do at the basis of everything, even before doing an embedding analysis, for instance, in my case.
Yeah.
So you have a real mapping, for instance, doing competitive NER and entity recognition between you,
Yeah.
your content, and the content of your competitors in order to understand what you both are covering, what you are not covering, and what you are covering, they not. And from there, starting to do, okay, let's go with embedding analysis with cosine similarity to see the very specific detail of why your competitors are more visible than you or what you have to defend in order to not, which is something for me very important. Many people forget it, to how to defend your already existing visibility and not throw it away trying to be more visible for other things. And I want to go back to the personalization thing. And I think that personalization somehow is a strange consequence of this AI search frenzy made SEO also rediscover something which is already existing and very classic of marketing, which is the buyer person. Because maybe we cannot create one piece of content for each individual, maybe searching something on a LLM, but we can create cohorts of personas that we want to target. So we can specifically try to answer to them, to these personas. So create a personalized, between brackets, content or chunks of these different personas. So to be visible to all of them, hopefully. Do you think that this is maybe the correct, not only way to think in terms of SEO for AI search, but also a good way to finally, let's call it finally, make SEO as a discipline talk with the same language of the CMO, so of the marketing leader of the companies, of the clients, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Love this question. So I just want to say it will be kind of a long response, but I will try to keep it in under 5 minutes. So the first thing is whenever we talk about personas, I think it has been a discussion, at least in my career, for like a very long time. But I know that not every SEO has been doing this. And now, yes, I think they should be focusing on this more and more, especially if they want to be relevant in AI search systems, but also in traditional ones as well. So, one concept that I want to credit Beatrice Gamba for really nicely developing in one of the courses that we have on ML for SEO Academy for AI search and entity SEO in the AI search era, what she references is the concept of co citation. So, actually building credibility with co occurring with other brands that you can compare with. So before you can compare with any brand like competitor based on a product that you offer, based on a service, or based on your brand attribute, we are already surfacing what I want to talk about is you have your entities, like your branded entities, the people in your organization, your product, your services, and then you have the attributes of those entities. So you have, for instance, for a product, it will be the price, or how is it delivered, what color it is, and so on, depending on what product it is. So you would have other competitor brands that you will appear in conversations with when people decide whether to choose a product or service from your brand versus one from a competitor. So what Beatrice talks about in this course is essentially strategically placing yourself in the conversation, whether through social media posts, through forum posts, through blog posts, whatever kind of content that you're producing, strategically placing yourself in proximity to other brands and pivoting the discussion based on the attributes of your entities that make you look most relevant to your audience. So that doesn't mean saying I'm the best brand regardless, for everything. If you are, that's great, but most of the time you will be the best brand for a certain persona, right? So this is where we kind of circle around to the persona discussion. I think it's very important nowadays not only to do this kind of mapping, who are your competitors, what kind of entities and attributes do they serve, what kind of entities and attributes do you serve. And I'll give an example. For instance, ML for SEO as an academy, we do courses. We're not the only academy to do this. Let's say, for comparison, Traffic Think Tank is another academy that does this. What differentiates us are the topics that we cover. We only focus on machine learning and marketing and SEO. And also, what differentiates us is the price. So, these are some attributes that we cover as a brand. So, in the context of, the exercise that I'm explaining, it would make sense for us to write and to say, yes, we know that this competitor exists. We know that they do a similar thing to us, but we only focus on these topics, whereas they focus on a full suite and they have more experience than us and they have more authors than us. And it's not a problem, especially in AI search era, to say this, to say that, for instance, you are a newer brand, or, kind of talking about your flaws is what I'm trying to say, because your flaws might be your competitive advantages for the right audience. So it's important for you to do the user persona mapping exercise, to do the entity attribute variable exercise, and to also do your competitor analysis, because then you have the three pieces of data that you need in order to actually execute this strategy. Where do I need to appear in the conversation? Who do I need to compare myself against? And who do I need to convince? Basically, those are the three questions that you need to answer as a brand in every discussion that you do online, whether that's on social media, on YouTube, webinars, blog posts, whatever you name it. And it can go as niche as you want. So, and that will be dependent on how niche your user personas are. And I think that will be a very interesting exercise going forward. I think we'll see a lot more like interesting creative ways to actually map out based on prompts, based on user queries, to actually extract data for personas. But again, this is something that Google only has at the moment. And of course, ChatGPT and so on.
Yes, but it's something that can be eventually retrieved. And I was thinking about this is a kind of persona that for a long time, actually, Rand Fishkin built an entire new tool, which is Sparktoro for this, and is the user persona. And so the user persona is not really the one that you target as a customer, potential customer, but the one that you target because it can influence your potential customer. So this is the kind of information that you need in order to understand where I have to be visible, with whom I have to talk with. Maybe it would be great to create co-marketing occasion, where to have a mention, where to not have a mention, etc., 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 and eventually even creating digital PR campaign and stunts. So yeah, because we know that one of the many legs for being visible in, especially when it comes to LLMs, so the differentiation between training data and fresh data. We want to be visible also when LLMs do not use fresh data. We need to be at least, or we are one of a trusted website already included in the training data, so it can eventually mention us. But if we want to be mentioned, it must be actually be mentioned. This kind of website, social media, forum website, etc.
And I think also one small insert here as well. Whenever, and this actually goes for both how Google adds facts to its knowledge graph and also how LLMs decide what is a trustworthy piece of information that they can include in their response. And that is actually where third party mentions become important because they need statistical amounts of websites or sources of data to confirm something as fact before they present it. And that goes for how Google discovers new information to add to the knowledge graph. They do tuples and inverse tuples. So they kind of ask a question, and if there's enough responses on the web to kind of confirm this as a fact, they would assess it and add it to the knowledge graph. And also LLMs, they would take the information from your website. Let's say, for instance, X and X amount of X person is the founder of this company, and then they would actually search other websites to see, is this information that we can confirm? I am not going to go into the discussion of how this can be hacked, because of course we know it can be. There's plenty of experiments in like black hat SEO. I'm not going to go into that. It is a flawed system, but it's the best system that they have came up with for the time being. But that's essentially what you need. So you need the third party mentions, you need the mentions on social media, you need to have the authoritative sources essentially saying and re-emphasizing the same thing. And the same thing in this context should be the most important facts related to your brand, your product, your like competitive advantages and all of that stuff. So you do need digital PR, but strategic, not just like X company has been mentioned on CNN. So what, I think that is where SEO and digital PR can be a lot more intertwined in the future to actually make those mentions really strategic.
Lazarina, before we're talking about the query funnel, and you wrote a really, really great article for iPullRank about the query funnel. I think it was for AI overviews, no? Right? AI overview
Uh,
query funnel. And you were saying that it's substantially the query funnel that is breaking the intent. What do
yeah.
you really mean with that breaking intent? Because we all built our SEO in the last years about search intent, etc. What do you mean with this?
So the article actually covered all of the systems. So not only Google does query fan out,
Yes.
ChatGPT, and yes, so the article covered all of them, and also Perplexity, all of them, and how they work. Some of them have been more transparent about their algorithms, others have been a little bit more secretive, but they all do fan out in some way. So the very interesting thing is that the way that the query fan out works is that they essentially whenever you have a query that you put in, let's say for instance the best running shoes for marathons, the fan outs actually take you further away from the core intent. So for instance, they might do a comparison query, they might do like a marathon training tips, which is of course really different from what you entered as your original query. So the way that we should approach search intent in the future, in my opinion at least, should be different depending on whether the query is user generated query versus a synthetic query. So making the distinction between the two is going to be, of course, a lot more difficult. And how we distinct between, synthetic queries and your user generated queries. But synthetic queries are queries that are meant to expand the user's horizons, because that's essentially the aim of the chatbot, AI mode, ChatGPT, is to introduce to the user a new topic that's related to their interests so that they can continue engaging with the chatbot.
The only difference is web guide. Web guide is not meant to do that. It's vertical. The query fan out is very, very vertical on the topic. It's going topic, main topic, which is the main topic intercepted, implied by the query, and then segmented in a subtopic, and eventually there is still similar to the classic search because still you can find mixed intent. So for instance, let's say about a vacation in, I don't know, in Canada, you can see information, kind of informational cluster topic, like guide, things to do, things to see, but also tours, so things to do, hotels, best resource, best hotels for this, etc., etc. So can be mixed, but it's very different. And maybe it's there where we can find the difference because we know that is where guide is still Gemini and Query Fan Out, but treated in a different way. And I would love to see something like the Q4, which have we have AI overview, AI mode, but something for web guide would be great because that could
Yeah.
give us the,
Good shout out
that
to
will
Mike
be
Pig.
the complete picture.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting how the different mechanics of how the queries are expanded and what this would mean for how we do keyword research or at least content planning in the future. For those that don't know, in the patent for AI mode, for instance, there are 8 different types of queries that query fan out generates. So when I say types, I mean, for instance, they would do entity-based query fan outs. They might do rephrasings. They might do expansions. So again, each of these different types would kind of have its own, let's say, category of how further away it can advance your query from the original intent and the original query that you have. And also, it's very important to also mention again the point of contextualization and personalization of the query fanouts. So let's say, for instance, and this is kind of a sneak peek of an article I'm working for iPull Rank again. But let's say, for instance, you have someone that again has been searching for best shoes for marathon runners, and then they have a chat, and then 2 weeks later they search for why does my foot hurt, and the AI chat, whatever wherever it is, Gemini, ChatGPT, wherever, will actually pull the other relevant chat from its memory and actually whenever they build the fan outs and whenever they build the response, they will incorporate the information that this user has been training for a marathon. And they might, even if they have like information, let's say, for instance, via ChatGPT's agent buying certain shoes for them, they might contextualize this information even further in the response to say, your feet might be running because you bought in these and these shoes. You have been training based on this plan. And I'm just giving a very generic example here. It's not as detailed, but it does include that in the response. So let's say, for instance, the response that this user is going to get is going to be very personalized based on the plan that ChatGPT has recommended, the shoes that they bought, how long has they been training for. Maybe it has information that the user has flat feet because they have discussed it somewhere, some chat ages ago. And it's super, super interesting to think about how this actually changes the nature of search. Because if you can imagine that Google, for instance, will have all of the knowledge about you as a user, they do have a ton of this, of course, already, but also information that is, implicit, like things that they don't fully know that haven't been explicitly stated in the query. Right now, we are seeing more of that implicit information being integrated into the chats searching, like agent behavior online when they're searching, and also the responses that they give. So users are not, I think, very in tune with this, not aware of this. But that's why I think most of the people are now searching on ChatGPT and changing their search behavior because it feels so much more personal. Like, oh my god, they really know what it's. Yes, they know because they have the data on you. you you
Yes,
very
and I mean, they should have been trained on, everything social media because social media actually
yeah.
knows you the same way. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But they're of course they're sharing this data
and
and they're
yes,
collaborating.
and I think that there is another way, another reason why people are. Part of it is more natural to approach, to have a conversation than typing, even if we were trained to do it for 20 years something like Hotel Madrid instead of Hotel in Madrid. I want to write in a sort of strange language, but there is, and I conducted recently a semiotic analysis of the interfaces, and they have been designed to why they always talk in first person. They never talk we in a third person authoritative person. Where the default mode is, even if it is precise, there are differences between models, but it's always slightly friendly, at least, so not very approaching. Then there are few things that differentiate. For instance, the fact that Perplexity is putting the sources before the answer somehow is reassuring. So you instantly think that, okay, he's using these sources, so it must be true. The fact that eventually others are inlining the sources with at least the name of one is present there. So they are really using well all the signs in order to be credible. And that's why people false and believe, even if they are substantially hallucinating things. Or Gemini is even worse in this sense because it's good. I mean, it's good. But from the same use of the icon of the sparks, like magic. So it's when you see an answer, it's something that he found this answer. It actually is a reinterpretation of something found, for instance, in a Reddit thread and written just because it's probabilistic sequence of words. But this is sometimes very hard to make understand to people, to normal people who are not inside into all the mechanics of this, or how a search works. And let's talk about your mentoring tutor, how I can define you in for ML for SEO. And I wanted to ask you, what kind of students do you have?
Yeah. We recently crossed 100 students in our academy that I'm very excited about. We only have 3 courses at the moment. We will have a ton more. We're working in the background on courses for Google Cloud, machine learning for marketers, and then Gemini for marketers as well. And yes, a ton more. So stay tuned. So what I do is essentially I plan the program, what I think is most relevant for SEOs and also for marketers as well. Because the way that we define like ML for SEO is a function, like a search function that exists on different platforms. So we will eventually have courses for YouTube, for TikTok, for Amazon, how to actually optimize the search function for those platforms using machine learning. And essentially, at the moment, I have 2 courses that I created on the academy. And then Beatrice Gamba from WordLift recently launched a course as well. And the people that we have as students vary a lot from whether they're enterprise organizations, in house SEOs, whether they are freelancers that are looking to understand machine learning and how they can streamline their operations. We also work a lot with agencies, and we also do training for agencies that have, let's say, for instance, bought team access for our courses for their team. And then we can take some of the concepts from the courses and apply them to specific scenarios that the agency team has or that has been looking to resolve via the help of automation, and essentially putting the concepts that we teach in practice for the specific use cases that the agencies have in their internal work and pipeline. So different mix. One thing, a characteristic that defines all of them is that they're all hungry to learn more about machine learning and AI, not through the lens of ChatGPT or generative AI, but actually to understand machine learning as a discipline. Understand, for instance, what is the difference between clustering and classification? What is the definition of generative AI in the concept of machine learning and in the concept of AI? What are the limitations of LLMs and things like that? So we do go into a lot of the theoretical aspects, let's say concepts like entity analysis, named entity recognition, EAV models, and all of that stuff, and knowledge graphs, ontologies. So we do a lot of theory in our courses and in the materials that we will launch as part of the paid academy that we'll launch this year. So when we are creating resources, we want to start with the theory so people do understand the concepts, terminology, they feel confident in explaining this to stakeholders, because I think that's the first step in you working with machine learning, that you need to be confident in the results that you're presenting and how you got to these results. And then, of course, we have a ton of practice, like a ton of resources that we share, like coding scripts, notebooks, and so on, that actually help people to get the first step in and actually get to the dopamine and the results from implementing machine learning. And once they do that, they're hooked. They want to automate everything and build their tools and all of that. So it's very fun to see. We also have a community on Slack, which is free to join for anyone listening, which is, again, another place to share projects and tools and what you're working on and news and so on.
Cool.
I'm sorry for taking so long.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's a wonderful project, and it should be. I mean, not everybody has been burned for learning all these things. One is
Yeah.
me. I'm still, maybe because I have so much. I don't want to say so much knowledge, but I know these things from the classic linguistic background on my
Of
study and
course.
so on. And I have a sort of idiosyncrasy in learning a new languages, which is substantially the basic. If you want to do machine learning, you have to learn a language, which is Python and so on. And
So just a caveat, the barrier for entry now has been the lowest it has ever been, especially as I mentioned, the
yeah,
Claude,
because
and they can do the coding for you, so you don't even
yeah,
need to learn
I know
Python.
that. I will give it a try in this sense. I sometimes I do my experiments, and I do my experiments. Some of them I'm quite proud of, because I can
Yeah,
use them also for my work. But I want to,
that's the best thing to do, I think.
yeah, yes, break things as we always did.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And one thing is, I want to talk, even if briefly, about the knowledge graph, because usually when we think of a knowledge graph, people always think to the classic Google knowledge graph. So knowledge panel, which is just, it's like the rich result, just the point
Yeah,
of the iceberg of a knowledge graph. But knowledge graph is something more. It's the real structured vision of everything related, for instance, to a brand or to a person or to a topic.
yeah,
So it's in terms thinking of agentic search, as for instance we were talking before. Knowledge graph is maybe the, as a concept, the best things to do in order to give all the information you want to give to the machine in a structured way. And the schema is just part of it. It's not
yeah,
even.
absolutely.
And but the question, the 1 million question, how can you explain this to a stakeholder who don't know anything about knowledge graph, about even maybe ontology, maybe
Yeah,
something learned. If you cite them Umberto Eco, let's say, they think in the name of
they think
Rose.
in money terms. Yes, yes.
Yes, they,
Um, So it's a very interesting question. You're kind of putting me on the spot here. I don't know why, but I thought that you would ask me, how do you explain this to students that don't want to
no,
think
I mean,
whether it's
some of the
important?
stakeholders
But
sounds
yes,
still
I will.
true.
Yes. So I think the way that I see it, like the most easy way to think about it, is that you have to tell the story that this is how the machine learns about you. So, yes, machines, like in general, bots and so on, are better and better at understanding unstructured text, but they're not there yet. So, they don't capture the nuance and they don't capture the relationships. So, structured data and entity relationship mapping, which is done through a knowledge graph, is actually how you help to communicate better with the bots that are visiting your website. And that goes for traditional search, and that also goes for AI search as well. So if you want to increase your visibility, you have to increase your understanding in the way that they receive the world. And one big pet peeve of mine is in the recent discussions for AI search optimization, some people I see have claimed that structured data is not important, and especially the structured data types that are very nuanced and very niche, they're no longer important. I think this is super false. This couldn't be further from the truth, because you need to actually pinpoint the relationships between the entities, and the way that you do that is with very detailed schema. I think the misconception comes from the fact that LLMs don't parse structured data during the training process, but they do that in the live system. So AI mode, it uses structured data, it reads it, it comprehends it. Traditional, of course, search, Google search and so on, uses that. So you do need that. And building your own knowledge graph is, I think, super, super valuable. Again, I'm mentioning her 2 or 3 times in this episode, but shout out to Beatrice Gamba, the entire WordLift team. By the way, they are pros at semantic SEO. And she has these wonderful resources about entity relationship mapping and building your own knowledge graph. And I think it's very interesting for people that are absolute beginners to really grasp this concept that you have step one, identify the entities that you are, known for, important, you want to rank for them, and they define you as a brand in the online space. And then map them, like how do they relate to competitors, how do they relate to one another. So there is a person, who is this person, are they a founder, are they an author, what kind of content they produce, why is this content important, have they created a product, how is
Yes.
this price, blah
And
blah blah.
I
And
think, yes, totally. And I think that the best example is how usually Google says, okay, for this article, these are the types that we really need. These are optional, good to have. And
yeah,
if you sum them, they are not all. But there is one type that Google says, I don't tell you anything, but the more things you can tell us, the better, which is organization.
yeah,
And
yeah,
why organization? Because it's the center. Because you put
yeah,
organization with the ID, you
yeah,
put it in every type, in every
yeah.
schema, and it's
But
it's your your
I
real
think
passport.
also for all of them, like if you have, let's say you're organizing events, you have courses, you have products, you have people, like you want also, especially for people, you want to capitalize on their personal brands that exist, let's say for on
Yes,
LinkedIn or wherever. You want to capitalize on that. You want to actually showcase your organization to the machines. Then, it's kind of like don't optimize for bots, right? But you're not, like you're actually opening a visibility layer so
I,
that your brand can be surfaced to users better, right? So
I
the
call
end
it
goal is be
I call
seen
it
by users.
translating to machine. Not
Exactly. Yes, 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 absolutely. Very important point. All of this text, all of this information that you put in the structured data should exist on your page. It shouldn't
yes,
be like cloaking and like you have a super massive structured data and then your page doesn't have anything. It shouldn't be like that. But once you have it on the page, just translate it to structured data. Of course, it's so important. And what, to your point as well, I think a lot of people miss on the linking part. Like you said, with the IDs, you can link the organization to all of the types. A lot of people miss that. They create structured data in silos because
yes,
if you know, that's how the agency model works. This quarter, we're doing this type of project. We're doing structured data on the
yes. But
article. The next month on the
I
people,
think
blah, blah, blah.
I think
So,
that Google is also guilty of this because of the rich results. Because when he presents in the structured data section of the dev subdomain, it says, for having the product rich result, use this. It's not
yeah,
telling you that you have to say that this product is part of a website, of a web page,
yeah,
which is part of a website, and using the ID to connect all these things.
yeah, yeah.
Google
But you
is not
should. You
telling this.
absolutely should.
Yes,
But Google is also saying a lot of things, as we know, but of course you should. So I think as a something that can move a beginner to an advanced is that understanding that, the linking part is one of the key components to actually making it click. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's an important thing to hone in on.
so let's talk about you so people can know Lazarina story a little more from not only for the machine learning side of things
Yeah.
and the SEO. So I wanted to ask you, what pushed you to create the community, to create and be the community leader of women in marketing in Bulgaria?
Ooh, yes. So I love Arish Abwali, the founder of A Woman in Tech SEO. I have been part of that community since literally the first like steps that I took in SEO. And I always loved the welcoming vibes and how nurturing it is for women supporting women. And it's very much an environment of giving first, and then of course it's a community, so it's a you receive as well, but you have to give more than you receive. I think that's a very kind of core principle. And then I started going to Brighton SEO, and I always thought this is a fantastic environment for learning, for networking. The people are so friendly, welcoming, and so on. And I always developed my career abroad, even though for the past 5 years I've been living in Bulgaria. Before that, I used to live in the UK. And the first conference that I attended in Sofia in Bulgaria, in my home country in general, the first conference and event that I attended as a professional, I really had a lot of feedback from women and also kind of, I would say, a little bit more negative interactions, something that I would typically associate with, how I have heard people talk about the SEO industry 15 or 20 years ago in the West. I kind of saw that kind of negative interactions on in my hometown. So I really wanted to kind of do a pulse check and see how are actually women connecting in Bulgaria? How are they finding peers to talk about different topics with? How are they learning from one another? Are there just women only communities? And of course, there are some, but I found that there was a really big lack of a marketing focused community for women. And once we launched, initially it was a slower experience. But one thing that I wanted to implement from the get go is different types of events. So, networking dinners, mini conferences, webinars, blah, 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 all the different things. And I saw that a lot of us were actually very similar in the way that we would work, in our ambitions, and very similar in the challenges that we have faced as well, regardless of whether you had a career focused in Bulgaria or you had a career focused abroad. And yeah, it's been such a great journey. It's been kind of slow, to be honest, because of me. I am the problem. I kind of had a bigger, growth plan. But the first year when we launched, and then 3 months later, I found out I was expecting my first child. And then this year, of course, I gave birth, and we only came back and we only had 6 months each of the years, basically 2024 and 2025. So we've essentially been running for 2 years, but we've only been active for one of those two. So 2026 will be the first year where we have a full blown event program with multiple events happening every month. And we are now actually, we recently crossed 300 members in our Slack community, which doesn't seem like a lot, but almost everyone from those 300 people has been to a in-person event and has
Cool.
seen actually how we do things. And the feedback that we've received is really positive. And I'm very, very happy because this has been one of the most rewarding initiatives. And I have met absolutely incredible people as a result of it. And I think, again, just to emphasize this, different countries are different in the way that they, approach in-person events, the way that they approach networking, the way that they approach, kind of equality and equity between genders. And I think it's important to kind of push the boundary when it comes to, what is the standard that we should be focusing on. So I'm very happy to be part of, this initiative in Bulgaria. I
Cool.
think it's a
Okay.
long road.
Congrats. Because I think that this kind of initiatives are very welcome and very needed for, beside of gender discourse or things like this, for the growth of entire community. I think
Yeah,
they are
absolutely.
really,
Yeah.
really needed and welcome. So, I mean, it's 1 hour and 6 minutes we are talking.
We can go on.
And
Everyone listening,
we,
how long should
yeah,
we
yes.
go?
Well, we can ask to an LLM to summarize our video
Yeah.
into short.
TLDR. Yeah.
Yes. So let's stop it here, but let's promise ourselves to meet up again. Maybe why not? We can ask Beatrice
Yes.
Gamba to join us and have a very, very nerdy conversation about ontologies, entities, and
Yes.
semantics.
in that conversation, I will take a sideline and I will
No,
just
no, because I
enjoy
mean,
absorbing the knowledge from you too.
no, but I think that you are neither because you could be the one that can ask us, let's do this. Everything
Yes.
you're saying, let's put in practice
Yes,
with
build it.
your
Yes, yes,
knowledge
absolutely.
in everything in machine learning.
Yeah,
But
it's been really great, and yes, let's absolutely invite Beatrice. And Beatrice, I didn't know that that's how it's pronounced in
yeah,
Italian, but
yes,
I
it's
love it.
Beatrice. It's very nice name. We have
Yes.
our national poet Dante. Beatrice was the name of his loved one.
Oh, I love it.
So
That's
it's a
awesome.
very famous name in Italian.
Love it. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing this little bit of knowledge. Awesome.
Thank to you. And thank you to all of you. And let's see, remember to ring on the bell so to be notified when a new episode of a search session is coming out and obviously subscribe to the channel. Thank you and bye bye.